we're back for Beer Dice and Sick Minis for another fun discussion about gaming and drinking beer. We don't really talk that much about drinking beer. Mostly gaming.
Mostly gaming, yeah.
Yeah,
Mostly gaming.
I'm
Maybe
your host.
Maybe we should start a beer segment.
Maybe one day. I'm your host, Eric Carpenter, and I'm joined tonight with my co-host Ken Sawyer.
Hey, how are you?
And Jeremy Wilkson.
Hello.
Yay! I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, like I used to pronounce Cody's wrong all the time.
No.
Yeah, pretty sure I am. It's Wilkinson, right?
No.
I know.
No.
I do that because every time somebody says something like from the Facebook group, they're always like, I'm always like, yeah, I was over. Jeremy was over. We were playing together. They're like, Jeremy Wilkinson. I'm like, it's Wilkson.
Yeah.
They're like, oh. I'm like, yeah. There you go. You fucked up that guy's last name.
Yeah.
He's angry. He's angry at home for no goddamn
There's just
reason.
not enough of us. There's like 8 Wilksons in the world, but there's
Right.
millions of Wilsons, Wilkersons, Wilkinsons. We're just outnumbered is the problem.
What Chumbawambas?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
I
I don't know either.
Yeah. I don't think I'm related to them either.
No, you're probably not. And we're gone. We've gone with Jeremy's good graces on the beer today, and are just simply drinking PBR because
They don't just give that blue
it's
ribbon
good.
away.
No, I had to do lots of weird shit to get this beer. We don't even like to talk about it.
9 ain't over, baby.
Oh God, I'm not sure whether I'm aroused or terrified.
I can work with both.
That's good. That's good. All right, so today we've got some awesome discussions that we're going to go over. Talking a little bit about Aeronautica Imperialis. We have also decided that we're going to cover a game we've never talked about before, which is Flames of War, because it sounds like it could be fun. I've actually been highly interested in this game since way back in the day. Ken actually first introduced me to it as a 15mm fancy fun game. And since then, I have never played a game. I've had many miniatures for it, and then sold them, and then got them back, and then sold them, but never played a game. And we're also going to go over, your usual new releases, hobby stuff, probably a little bit of Malifaux and things like that in there, stuff we've been doing gaming-wise in between shows. So shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Big thing is we got, both Ken and I got some games of Aeronautica Imperialis in between the shows.
Right. We the first time we just kind of messed around with putting it together and started playing, and
The
then
first
we
time Ken and I
independently-
only messed around.
we really just messed around.
It was only like second base. It was,
But we did assemble all the ships in 45 minutes, an hour, or something like that. It wasn't
yeah,
bad.
it was like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all.
No, it wasn't too bad. We got the planes put together. There are some fiddly bits. On the 1 to 10 scale, 10 being Malifaux, 1 being pre-built miniatures like X-Wing, pre-built, pre-painted. I would put them at about a 5.
Yeah, it wasn't really
cake.
bad. It was more clip out than other things.
Right, and
Not a lot of dry fitting.
there's always dry fitting.
I said not a lot of it, though.
Yeah, not a lot. We sat down, we basically got through the movement sequence, the movement phase, or the beginning of the movement phase, trying to understand the rules, which I got in greater thing whenever Nate and I played a game, Nate apparently got the Creeping Congo crud, that's why he's not here tonight. But he and I played a game over here last Wednesday, and it was fun.
And then I played a game with a friend in my area, and we actually ran through 2 little games. One where we just messed around with like a plane each, so he got how to play the game, and then we played with like the full thing again. All the ships.
All the ships. Yeah, Nate and I did. I think we did mostly just the fighters. Was pretty much what all we had out on the table. We didn't use any of the orc bombers or anything. I used the 2. What are they? Thunderbolt Furies. I built mine as Furies with the big auto cannons on the front, so I could get lots of dice.
Daka.
Yeah, and that's actually very important in that game. A brief overview of basically how the rules work is you set out the mat, you set up your scenario, you get your planes. In the beginning, kind of during deployment, you set your altitude and speed. The movement phase is the most important part of that game by far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you absolutely have to pay attention to what you're doing as we started learning out. Because at first we were kind of like, okay, we weren't messing with the throttle or the altitude at first in the movement phase. And then we realized how important that was, and we started messing with it, and then we realized that there was an order that you were supposed to mess with it. And we were like, oh shit, okay, well, we got to do a little bit different stuff now. And turns out that basically how you do it is when you select a ship to activate, it is alternating activations. You can adjust your speed at that time.
At the time, right.
And then you reveal your ace maneuver, adjust your speed, and then you do your ace maneuver. And basically it's a chart that shows you, kind of a roadmap of hexes. And you have to move in the direction of, the first hex is black, all solid black, and that's where your plane is. And then you have the arrows going in different directions or straight forward or, whichever side of the hex it is, that's where you kind of turn and move your ship however many hexes of your speed you want to. You can do all or, as long as you move at least one, that's all you got to do.
Sounds like tactical light bright.
Yeah, kind of. And then the next part of the ace maneuver will show a dashed outline on a hex.
Right.
And then it will have other directions that you can, turn to and then finish your movement or, kind of do whatever. So you'll move 1-2 hexes, then you'll turn again and adjust your orientation, and then you move 3 more hexes if you're at speed 5.
Right.
And at the end of your movement, you can adjust your altitude, which will change your speed.
Depending on if you're going down in altitude or up in altitude.
Right. And that's important because if you're setting up for an attack run and somebody is below you and you've pulled up behind them and you don't want to take a negative to hit roll, which is very detrimental in the game.
It is.
You need to adjust your altitude accordingly to their altitude. And if you're at max speed and you need to adjust down, you're suddenly taking a roll to see if your ship is falling apart as it's increased its speed too much, because you're at max speed already. You dive down 1 altitude, your speed goes up by 1.
You gotta take a pilot check.
Yeah, well,
I can't wait. I'm going to end up my ship's going to fall apart as it crashes into one of my own ships.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
If Armada was any indication of how you're going to play it, it's going to be interesting.
I'll still win though.
Probably, just like you did with Armada, you fuckhead. But anyway, then at that point you take what's called a breakup rule. I think. Yeah, breakup. And at that point, that means that Susie has said, you don't shower enough and you haven't done your laundry in 3 weeks, I'm leaving you.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding. Your plane starts taking damage if you roll like shit. And then you can, and then of course the other player, you move all your stuff, and then you start shooting dakka-dakka-ing at each other, depending on your fire arcs and all that stuff. And everything is hits on a 5. Because it's hard to hit shit that's in the air flying around at supersonic speeds.
Yep.
And again, if you are altitude above or lower, you're at -1. If they're in a spin, you're at, again, another -1. You can... There's all kinds of little modifiers here and there that are all -1, basically, that say, nope, you're screwed. And then, you roll to see if you hit, and then each weapon has a damage rating. So you don't actually have armor saves. You'll just basically, roll your dice to hit. Like the autocannons on the Thunderbolt Furies, they have, you have different dice depending on range. And, 1 through 4 hexes is short range.
Short.
Medium is 5 through 7. And then, 8 hexes and up is long range. And... you basically end up rolling your dice to see if you hit. If you're gonna, if you're on, same altitude and nobody's stalling or spinning or whatever, you're going to roll 5 ups. So any 5 ups you get, you re-roll those to see if you damage. And depending on what the damage rating on your gun is, and depending on the range, tells you how many dice you roll. So like the Thunderbolt Fury autocannons, I roll 3 dice at short range, 7 dice at long range, and I can't hit or medium range, and I can't hit shit at long range. And
yeah, it's interesting. The Imperials have where they have capabilities at long range with lasers, and then like short or medium with the regular guns, whereas the orcs are all like short range. Like,
yeah,
like
Guys flying by in a biplane throwing a rock at you.
That's right.
yeah, that's all that DACA doesn't go very far.
It does not. But yeah, it was very interesting. It played quickly. Even with playing everything that comes in the starter box, like the second game I played, it actually went like 45, 50 minutes, just under an hour.
Was that 12 turns?
Yeah, it was. We got right to 12 turns. And, you know, I think it moves pretty fast. That's the 12 turns thing is you don't go past turn 12 in the game.
Yeah. You only have a max of 12 turns, and basically I actually got the I do suggest the starter box is a good deal.
It is.
But common GW, you can expect to buy other shit. And I bought the Rin's World campaign book on the iBooks, so I get the interactive edition.
Yep.
So that as there's updates, it'll update. And that is cool because it has additional scenarios, because the only scenario that's in the main, the starter box rule book is the dogfight one, where basically you're just dogfighting. The Rin's World has several other missions, like Bombing Run, that actually starts involving the ground asset, so you can have flat guns,
right?
Things like that in your army. And then, of course, Bombing Run is you have to destroy some of those. Then you get, there's one scenario that looked really cool, which is you have to take a plane in your list that has a transport capacity.
That's right.
And you have to land in like one of the center hexes of the map. And then you have to sit there for like one turn or something like that.
Yeah.
And be guarded by your other planes, and then take back off, and then get to the edge of the board so you can voluntarily disengage.
Right.
And to succeed in the scenario. And then the other guy just has to shoot the shit out of you.
Right.
So it looks like it's fun.
So all he's got to do is take out that transport.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And I like the way they did victory points, because if you involuntarily disengage, then you get victory points based on how many points the actual plane is. And if you involuntarily disengage or whatever, then your opponent gets like so much a percentage of the points rounded up.
Right.
If you end up fucking up and going into a spin and your plane explodes, your opponent gets half your points. I believe it's 50%.
50%.
Half your points as victory points, things like that. The other thing that I noticed that was really cool is they do a mechanic in the game for unbalanced lists to help balance them.
To balance them out.
Yeah.
You're getting the ability to have a par-like system that is, based upon, how many points you have. The game is weighted a certain way.
You have to be within 10 points of each other's list. So if you decide a 200-point maximum, nobody can go over 200. You can't go to 201.
But if I rolled up with 120...
Well, then we'd change our max points.
Okay.
But
I'm just wondering how big of a swing you're talking about for this par thing.
Just 10.
Yeah, it's just 10. And so if we decide on a 200-point game and I have 199 points, then when you start, if you have if you're 194, then you automatically get 5 victory points.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Right off the bat.
What's an average score of a game?
Based on like the points of ships and stuff, they're all like 20 points, 40 points, things like that. So you're going to probably have, 100 points to 100 point victory.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Span.
I think in the second game I played, it was close to 100 points.
Okay.
Something like that.
But I mean, if you're at a close
5
game,
points could win the game, but
right?
Yeah.
You know,
You're-
we're not talking about a huge swing either.
No.
Right.
no.
You know, I might have 90 points and you might have 89, and then your 5 points you got at the beginning puts you to, 94 or something like that. And, here you were losing a little bit, and then your 5 points swings you just right up above me, so you win.
Yeah.
And that's a cool thing that I like, because it definitely lets you have an underdog list that matters, And they do that, I think, also because some of the scenarios are meant to be kind of unbalanced.
They are. And the other thing that I like about the game in general is that they've made a fun game that's quick to play, quick to put together the miniatures. I mean, you as a player, you only really need to buy like the ground out set box that has the markers for flat cannons and stuff like that. But then you're buying like 1 or 2 packs of planes outside of the starter box, and that's it. And I like that they've made it simple. You start playing. The games are relatively fast. There's a lot of different scenarios for you to play. And one of the things that GW's learned over, making games for as long as they have is that they've left a lot of room for depth of the game. They can go as deep as they want to based upon sales of the game and see how it goes. And I think they did the same thing in the other game that's like this, where they have this depth that they've built in, and that's why they can continue to put out these supplement books and make it kind of fun and interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of supplements, a lot of things they can put out. They can put out new battle zones for it. They have it set up so that it's very scalable.
Yep.
So you could do giant fleets if you wanted, get up into the, several hundreds of points games. You could even, the other cool thing is because they do have upgrade cards for your thing.
Yep.
You can put an ace pilot in one of your fighters. And they do things like reroll 1s or add 1 to hit. There's a lot of stuff that they can start adding in that's going to be really, really cool as that game expands. Not to mention just as it expands into the other factions of 40K, and you get things like, Necron flyers or, whatever.
Right. The other alien races and stuff like that. The other Xenos are going to be out there. And just like we were talking about last week, I could easily see a store or a convention or a tournament being, hey, we're playing Mechanicus over here, and we're playing, Aeronautica over here, and these 40K guys. And guess what? Everything that we're doing is all related.
Yeah.
And
we were talking about that from the Star Wars stuff with Armada, X-Wing, and Legion. You could easily make a narrative where it's all happening on a planet, in its atmosphere, and in the solar system.
Right. And what would be really fun to do with some of these games that would definitely breathe new life into, say, 8th edition and 40K in general.
Yeah.
You could do a full campaign where you break out your old Battlefleet Gothic stuff, and you play some, space battles of Battlefleet Gothic.
Right.
Then you move from that to, some Aeronautica Imperialis missions where you're trying to land troops and scenarios like that. Once you land those troops, then you've got a few kill team missions where you're trying to set up objectives to call down the big armies.
Right.
And then you pull into a 40K game where you have
the big armies have landed and it's time to throw down.
We're not big army yet.
Oh, okay.
No, sweetheart. I'm thinking big picture. and then so you set that up. Then you have your mid-sized battles, which is where your 40K armies come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the campaign, you go nuts and have a few apocalypse games.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Because now you can play apocalypse, relatively quickly.
Yeah. And so I just like that they've kind of thought through this, and they're going to have some fun. Like I said, I could easily see, a group of 8 people going, 4 of us are going to play Mechanicus, and 4 of us are going to play Aeronautica, and then we're going to just, play right on top of each other, that kind of thing. It'd be interesting.
Yeah. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
It'd be an interesting way of doing, because there's something I wanted to maybe bring up in the next issue, but it's kind of bringing it up, is multiplayer in these formats to me seems very limited. Mm-hmm. Most of the time when you are playing multiplayer, somebody gets underserved or somebody gets overserved in a 3-way game, or it's basically teams. So it's a more complicated 1v1.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that my experience with Kill Team, even though when we were playing 3 people in Kill Team,
Yeah.
you had a little bit of that, but it was nowhere near as bad as some of the other games I've seen that have multiplayer format, where just kind of like one person's just getting trashed on.
Right.
Like when we played the other side as a 3-player game, it was like, okay, wow, this kind of sucks.
Well, what I've always found is 9 out of 10 times on any 3-player game.
Right.
Now, when you start getting into like 4, 5, or more,
then it's not so
well,
bad.
you still see versions of this that play out multiple times in the game, but you either have it's definitely in the 3-player game, you have the overserved player, 2 people basically just one person posts them up and one person knocks them down, or you have the 2 people go head to head while one person just kind of sits back and waits and cleans up the mess.
Yep.
And so like I said, one person either gets overserved or one gets underserved, and they just sit back and deal with everybody afterwards.
Yep. And that's definitely a discussion we can have. And I enjoy the fact that I'm seeing how a lot of these specialist games that GW is putting out tie into their other IPs and their products. And I'm really happy for the direction that GW is going with Warhammer 40K and stuff like that. And I really hope that they continue on this trend, and then we'll get Warhammer 40K either 8.5 or 9th edition that actually brings in a modern rule set, because I don't know a single 40K player that will tell you that they have this incredibly modern, by game design standards, rule set, because they don't. They have an old historical style rule set that you go everything, I go everything, the no alternating activations, none of that stuff. They really have not innovated that part of the game, the sequencing, I guess you could say. And once they innovate that, I think that 40K will be 10 times more fun.
Right. Where it's a little bit more interactive.
Right. Because that's my biggest complaint about it right now is I'm going to play a game of 40K. Awesome. Let's set up. Oh, you want initiative? Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go make a sandwich, and I'm going to go and drink a few beers and hang out at the bar for a little while, and then I'll be back. And, by then I'll need to roll some saves.
Right.
And it's just I don't enjoy that anymore, since I've been playing a lot of these skirmish games where we're constantly doing shit on each other's turns and there's a lot of interactivity.
Yeah. So
bringing that in, Ken wanted to talk to us about Flames of War.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I've been playing Flames of War for quite some time, and Flames of War is a historical miniature game that's 15 millimeters, so it's much smaller than a lot of the other games that we're playing.
Right.
And it has this history where they pretty much have done everything World War II. They've also kind of expanded into World War I with a couple of things, but in recent times they actually did Team Yankee.
Yeah, Team Yankee looks fun too. I have some of that stuff.
So Team Yankee is really where they kind of jumped into the modern, they did some stuff with Dust, but then Team Yankee really became where they came into their own of what modern gaming is like. And so they introduced the idea of cards for your units. They simplified the rule set a little bit. It was a much more modern game because we're talking about Cold War situation, so there's a lot more armies than just 3 or 4 that were involved in World War II, and so they have a lot of variety. There's helicopters, there's planes, there's all sorts of things in Team Yankee, and Team Yankee kind of led to where their 4th version of the game came out, which is recently they came out with earlier this year they came out with the 4th edition of the rule set, and it's interesting. Small games can happen in 30 to 45 minutes. Bigger games are going to take an hour and a half.
Now, what's a small game?
Small game would be, like 2 armored units going after each other. And that's really, like, if you're wondering about how to get started, a handful of tanks apiece is really going to be. And when I say handful, maybe if it's World War II, that might be like 10, 15 models for the Allies and 6, 7 models for the Axis, depending on which army you're playing and stuff like that. You can just as easily put 5 Tigers on the board for the German army, and then you'll have 15 tanks for the Americans. Like that, points wise, that would be a small game.
Okay.
Whereas a bigger game would be 8, 9 units apiece, something like that. And it just depends on what era you're playing in. They kind of break it up in the World War II version of it, where it's early, middle, late.
Didn't they also do a Vietnam War era?
They did a Vietnam War era that kind of wedges in between the World War II and the Team Yankee. Now, Team Yankee, though, a small game there, you might have 1, 2 units. In fact, some of the scenarios, you have an armored unit, an AA unit, and a flyer, and that's your army. And so the Team Yankee, like I said, kind of simplified the rule set, and that's what happened with the 4th edition of Flames of War for the World War II games. They just said, hey, some of these things, cards, simplifying the rule set, simplifying the armies a little bit, makes it easier for people that maybe aren't the historical people, but want to play a miniature game that's different. That's how they get them
involved.
involved.
Not to be specific about Flames of War, but
Right.
to me it seems like that's all you're hearing across the entire, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, platform of all gaming, of tabletop gaming, is simplifying the rules and streamlining. Because I don't think for one second that gamers of tabletop gaming have become less sophisticated.
Right.
But I think what they're finding that is when your rules are so bloated, the game becomes about rules knowledge. When your rules are simple, it becomes about strategy. Sometimes less is a lot more.
Well, strategy and or unit knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. Being able to memorize everybody's units, like in Malifaux, complicated.
Yeah.
How can you know everyone's army?
Yeah, you're not going to know what everybody does.
Right.
There's almost no way to know what every model in that game does.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm not so much talking about every single model, but I'm talking about the difference between, a 70-page rule list and a 40-page rule list. Where it's just they're simplifying and they're streamlining things where it becomes more about strategy and less about just the bloated rule knowledge and having all this. Because you see what I'm saying?
Right. I agree with you, and I think having had experience playing Infinity,
Yes.
which is
super simple, great game.
No. You only played the starter rules.
Oh, I guess that's
and
true.
the starter rules are super simple. And my thing is, if as we continue to play and bounce between games here and there, when we go back to Infinity, we're going to mostly just be using those starter rules with kind of the starter stuff to it, and ignore a lot of the other crap, because it's a lot more fun that way, a lot more skirmishy, and I think it remains balanced. When you start bringing in the full rule set, you literally have across 3 or 4 books, it's like 30 to 40 pages per book of just abilities that models have.
Right.
And you're having to cross-reference all these abilities and know what the hell they do.
Yeah, that's just bloated rules.
And it comes, it is a massive rules bloat game. And then it's made worse by the fact that, it's an English rule book that was originally written in Spanish that was translated to French and then translated to English or something along those lines.
Right.
When it comes to these big rules, I just want to look at them and say, people still play the shit out of chess.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a great game, and it's simple.
Yeah.
But
And
there's
I think
a lot of strategy involved in that simplicity.
Yeah, and I think that's where the cards come in, too, is it used to be that you're having to flip through books, and everybody's like, man, if I just had my unit cards out here, and I have the 5 or 6 units that I have right in front of me, game becomes a lot easier for me. And I think that's why they're adding some components like that. It's just to simplify it for the players so they can concentrate on playing the game and having fun, right?
Well, it was like when Ken and I first sat down and we started playing Aeronautica Imperialis, and the unit stats are only in the rule book, and we're passing the rule book back and forth,
right?
And flipping between them, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so cumbersome. And then I'm like, wait a minute, every game used to be like this.
Yeah.
I remember you could not play 40K unless you had your codex.
Right.
There was no way possible to do it. You had no data cards. There was no battle scribe. There was nothing. You had your codex, and every time you did a unit, you had to flip to another page.
Yeah. And so the only other things I was going to say about Flames of War is I tend to play where I kind of pick a period. There's an early, there's a middle, and there's a late. What they would tell you in 4th edition is don't worry so much about that. Play the game, figure out what armies you like, access allies, and then kind of, depending on what scenario you're playing, you figure it out from there. I tend to like the historical part of it, so, I'm goofy that way. I'd rather go, oh yeah, man, I'm totally playing mid-war, and unless you really know a lot about World War II, you might be like, what's mid-war? Like, I have no idea. But I like the game also because it's really based on scenario and objectives. It is not just wipe the other dude off the table. They do have really balancing things like that you just described in Aeronautica, where is it a major victory? Is it a minor victory? They have ways for you to scale it out based on, did you hit your objective? So objectives become important. The scenario for the game is, if you're playing just to blow each other off the map, you're probably playing the game wrong.
Yeah.
And that happens with a lot of the games that we currently like, is it's scenario driven.
Yeah.
So. Right. Well, I mean, that's like Malifaux. If you're playing just to kill each other, you're playing it wrong.
I think you're playing it wrong.
Looking at you. We actually do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Because most of the time we're like, I want to figure out how this crew works or see how this mechanic works. Yeah. We're just going to kill each other this time. But, and that happens way too often.
Right.
Because we really need to start focusing on learning those strategies and schemes better. But anyway, how is the mechanics of Flames of War?
Well, we were just discussing right before we started with the podcast that one of the things that's great about the rule set is that, in some regards, it is still, I move, you move, I shoot. I'm taking my turn, then you're taking your turn. But there are things that each player can do, like you're not stepping away, like you're talking about with 40K. There's things that you can do as the defending player. The other person's going. You have all these different things that you're doing also to interact with it. Not just taking saves, but like, hey, I can pass that damage from this one to that one as long as you can see this one. Like, I can choose for a particular model not to be hit, and you spread it out to the rest of the unit and stuff like that. So that way you're not losing commanders. And different armies have different rules for stuff like that. Like the Italians, if you try to take out their commander, they make a roll, and that person could become like this super heroic person because you make a save, and then it changes the game, right? Yeah. And so it's very interesting that they've kind of built in this interaction into the game, and it's been that way for a while. But yeah, mechanics-wise and how the role plays work.
It's a you go, then I go.
Yeah, it's a you go, I go, but you're interacting with each other a lot more.
Right. Yeah. So you still have things you're doing during your opponent.
Yeah.
Your opponent's
you don't feel like
moving.
you need to go get a snack.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Moving, shooting, charging, doing whatever, but you're doing things to mitigate all that while they're doing it.
Yes.
And then instead of just you move, you shoot, I just roll saves, yay, thanks. Now it's my turn. Now I get to move and shoot and do whatever and bitch about how well your dice rolled versus mine.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you could just have a horrible dice day and the game would go completely sideways for you. It's still somewhat reliant upon that, but not completely. Not completely.
Right.
And the way they treat armor versus individual soldiers is completely different. You're rolling for different situations, and they've built in a natural, like, hey, if they're a dude on the ground, more than likely, you can do things like, I'm going to dig foxholes and make it way harder to kill these models and stuff like that. So that's something that they've done.
That's one of the things I like, having been big into Malifaux and getting into the card mechanic of the weird games. I like the card mechanic. It's really cool. I do have and would love to see somebody look or figure this out. The basic probability, between card deck versus dice.
Right.
Like, we talk in Malifaux about your deck being hot or cold, or all my flips were shit.
Well, I've talked about this before on here. That to me, like the deck is not random. It's a resource that you're using. I mean, especially if you're playing a full game. I mean, we have many rounds, especially in the first and the second, when you still have a lot of models on the table, where You've used the entire deck and had to reshuffle it to draw more. That's not random at that point. You use that entire deck, so
I'm just talking.
Resource out of
I'm
it.
talking about the number generation of the deck. Because I don't know how many times I've gone to do things and I've been like, well, not doing that. And I've already burned an activation to, an action, an AP basically to do it, and I can't.
Yeah.
Which is the same as rolling like shit on your dice.
Right.
But the thing is, your dice can roll hot and stay hot, and your dice can roll cold and stay cold. That deck will not be hot and cold all the time. It's gonna fluctuate because
I've had some games where it's felt like it was cold the whole time.
Yeah.
Definitely
more in Henchman Hardcore because you don't burn through the whole deck.
But my point is, and this is getting off of the debate.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes your deck, yes, you are still going to get those high cards, but they're not necessarily when you need them because sometimes you are flipping for silly, stupid shit.
Yeah.
Okay, I need an 8 to beat your Terrifying, and I just flipped a 13. I didn't need that high of a card. Now my next card is a 2 to actually hit you.
Yeah.
I'm fucked.
It's like, let me just do this movement trick. Oh, red Joker, great.
Yeah, I would have much rather had that on an attack or critical damage.
Yeah.
So it's like the probability of how your deck works, success or failure in an action in the game versus how your dice work, success or failure of action in a game, the probability thereof, because I think dice games versus the deck mechanic, I honestly think they're really on par with each other.
Well, the deck is definitely more swingy.
I think the deck makes you feel more interactive. Mm-hmm. And that's what the big key thing is to it, is that you feel more like you are affecting the outcome more so than you necessarily really are. Mm-hmm. And, having the hand helps as well, but sometimes your hand is shit.
Yeah.
But it can still affect outcomes of things, whereas the dice, you feel like the dice roll, that's it. There's nothing else you can do other than whatever may be in the rules mechanic of, reroll 1s or a +1 or +2, and if it's still not enough, you feel like your dice have let you down.
Right.
Yeah.
They're going to roll the number they're going to roll. You're going to flip the card you're going to flip. It's going to be what it is, and I would really love to see that actually mapped out statistically.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you the probability, I think, of success or failure of action is really about the same.
Maybe.
It's just a preference of how you determine that success or failure.
So somebody way smarter than us that's listening to this podcast, do that study, and we will totally talk about that study.
Yeah.
Please, somebody else do the homework for us.
The last thing I was going to say about Flames of War, just to kind of wrap that up, is that entry point wise, it's really low. You can buy the starter box, like the Stalingrad box is the starter box, the current one. It's like $35.
Well, isn't that the 3rd edition?
Might be, but
because Hit the Beach is the
one.
4th. It's $90.
$90, but it has
a shit ton of stuff.
Right, it has two significant. Where Stalingrad has a few Soviet tanks and a few German tanks, and you're just starting off. So either way, you're getting a substantial value in the starter boxes. It's easy to get into this game. And then most
Stalingrad is 4th edition.
Is it?
Because El Alamein was the 3rd edition.
3rd edition.
So Stalingrad is the so you have two different choices of starter, which is really cool. You have the $35 here's a few tanks, or you have the $90 Hit the Beach, which is I put a good bit of my stuff for that together, and it is multiple bases of infantry.
Right.
And of course this is 15 millimeters, so that's why you don't have a model.
We're talking about Stalingrad.
Right.
Yeah, should be a lot of infantry there.
And so that's the thing is, to get started, you could start off, under $100, and most armies are going to be 200 or so that you're going to spend on it. Most units are in the $35 to $50 range, and a lot of your armies are only going to have maybe 4, 5, 6 army, units in an army, depending on what, what nation you're playing under. It just depends. So very easy for somebody to get started and start playing, and then figure it out from there. I don't like armor as much, or I like mixed units and stuff like that. Yeah.
I personally really enjoyed having bought El Alamein.
Yeah.
I personally really enjoy the value of the Hit the Beach because it was, like I said, it was $90, so you're under the $100 price point. That ceiling. You're literally getting multiple rifle companies of Germans and Americans. You're getting, I think it's like 4 or 5 M1 Abrams.
Yep.
Or not M1 Abrams, but
the Shermans.
Shermans.
Yeah.
Shermans.
Abrams came a bit later.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm wrong era. That's Team Yankee with the Abrams.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you're getting, I think it's about half that number in Panzers.
And Panzers, right.
And then you're also getting, you get, with the infantry dudes, you get a couple field pieces, actual
That's
artillery.
correct. Yeah, like artillery
So-
or gun teams. Is what
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you actually get a really cool variety of stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say is watch that instruction manual and be really careful because I had to match up poses of dudes to poses of dudes to make sure I got my units correct.
Yeah. And I will say this is they're really making the effort, and I know we're going to go over this in a little bit, but they're really making the effort to switch things over to plastic. When I got started in it, it was almost all like
It was resin and metal, and I remember
resin
being
and lead. Yeah,
I
it
remember
was-
being like, that was the first experience I had with resin and lead composite materials. And I remember you handed me a couple tanks, and I was like, Ken, what the fuck is this shit? I'm like, how do I even deal with this? It won't glue. And you're like, dummy, that's plastic cement. You got to use super glue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember all that. And that was when you introduced me to, I think, some of the Zap-A-Gap and some of the other stuff.
The products to help.
Yeah, to help fill gaps instead of using green stuff and milliput.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, with us, me belching and getting done with Flames of War, I say we take a little break here, and then we'll go on to some upcoming releases and our experiences and a little bit of hobby stuff before we get done with the podcast. Sound good to you guys?
Yes.
Pote.
Yeah, they want breaks too. They don't like you either. Okay, and we're back from our fancy little break. Thanks for that, guys. Anyway, that was my biting sarcasm, you pieces of shit. I'm just kidding. I love all of you. Anyway, we'll get on to some new releases and stuff coming out because that's always fun to talk about too. And of course, on the forefront with churning out tons and tons of shit for miniature wargaming is Games Workshop.
They have a plethora.
Yes, they do.
They do.
Coming up, they are on pre-order. They come out Saturday. Will be the new box of Eliminators. And that's going to be $50 US. They have 3 dudes in there. Eliminators are supposed to be actually really, really good under the new Space Marine Codex. A Phobos Lieutenant in Phobos armor, whatever you want to call them. They're also releasing the Iron Hands and the Raven Guard Codex.
Yeah.
Codex supplements.
What was the was it Furios or whatever he is?
Yeah, Pharos.
Yeah, that's a cool looking model.
He is very cool. He's one of the big dudes in the Iron Hands, which are really cool chapter of Space Marines, and they have really badass rules. I mean, they're basically healing up their vehicles and ruining your shit all day long, and a lot of heavy weapons.
And you have the Raven Guard just saying, "We hate your characters."
Yeah, the Raven Guard hate characters, and they have stealth and everything else. So not only do they hate your characters to snipe out your characters, they also are really hard to hit.
Right.
They get a lot of bonuses from that, just kind of going over that. Ken said that he pre-ordered that Raven Guard Codex.
I did. I did the iTunes ahead of time, the iBooks
yeah.
version of it, and it comes out on the 22nd, I think.
Yes, Saturday.
Getting down on the emo guard.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They come out, which we talked a little bit about the Shrike model.
We did.
And some of that stuff. And that's the new releases coming out there. There's nothing necessarily in the next week or so that I can think of for some of the other games. Like Malifaux, I know that they are trying to get their stuff out as quick as possible. As we've said before, Weird is a really small company.
Yeah.
And so they with the demand that M3E has created, they have been struggling a lot to get some of these releases out. So If you happen to play Malifaux, bear with them.
Be patient. Let's buy it all up again and put them right back in this situation.
Yes, because this situation is good for them and it means they'll be around longer. When you can't find your models, just go, well, damn it. At least that means that you're going to get them.
Yep.
Because you know what kind of models are pretty easy to find? Dark Age. I can find Dark Age stuff on eBay and other places all day long.
Right.
Because no one plays it.
Well,
People do, but it actually does have a strong player base. But because CMON has stopped supporting it for, focusing primarily on Song of Ice and Fire, which can't blame them. That's what's making them money. That game is really good as well.
Reminds me of my Disc Wars. And I got into that a while back, and then I was just trying to sell it, and I went online to sell it, and I was getting hit with people trying to sell me their Disc Wars.
I know that upcoming, though, we do have the Victoria and Shenlong box coming out soon.
Yep.
Speaking of Malifaux. And then moving on, there is, I guess, a bunch of new stuff for Flames of War that, Ken can go over with us because he knows the most about it.
Yeah, it's just that they've made the big push to go plastic. Like we were talking about with Team Yankee, they really push for a lot more plastic kits. There's a lot of development, just like we were talking about with Malifaux. There's a lot of development that goes into those plastics to make them right. And pretty much what's coming out in September, October timeline is everything German to go along with the D-Day German book that just came out. And so, Panthers, Tigers, Stugs, Panzers, lots of plastics.
An SD KFZ 250.
Which is a mechanized armor.
It sounds like an STD.
And a Puma.
Yeah.
Which is not a cougar. Sadly for you.
Or
It's not a Puma.
It's also not a warthog from Halo.
No, it is not.
Though they did try to name it a Puma. For anybody who's seen Red versus Blue.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then of course, one of the other companies we talked about, Privateer Press, they don't have, as far as I know, they don't have any upcoming new releases.
There's just a couple of things. They're really supporting their new game, and if you're interested in that, there's some releases for it. The big thing that I saw, and I put in there in the notes, is that I've been in several stores. There's not a lot on the shelf with Privateer, which I think is crazy. If your distributor's not carrying it, call them directly. I know the guy that works in the trade stores. When we talked about me working at GW, he was one of the guys I worked with. He's really kind, and we'll put the email address so you can order directly. Like if you're a store, we'll put it in the show notes and you can email him. But Rob will definitely take care of you. It's awesome.
That is awesome. And any of you that are on our Facebook group listening to this podcast, if you know of things that are upcoming and coming out that would be really cool that you would like to have us mention or talk about or go a little bit into, feel free. That is part of what that group is for.
Yeah.
And while I'm on the topic, that group is also for, and it actually originally started under a different name and not attached to a podcast, and I kind of repurposed it when I started the podcast. But that group is also for, since most of our members are local to, the kind of North Georgia area, it's for you to find groups of gamers to game with. It is part of a community building exercise and experiment that I started a couple years ago. And the idea was that, I post on there, hey, we're doing a game night at my place, every open invite, or hey, I'm going to be at Vendetta Games. Those are things I would like to see a lot more of our members doing. Let us know where you're at, what you're doing, because people may want to hook up with you and play a game.
Right. Or like if you're hosting a tournament or something like that, we'd love to kind of see that stuff in there. It'd be great.
Or if you happen to hang out at an FLGS that we're not necessarily super close to, feel free to post the events going on at your store, because you never know when one of us might be able to trek down to one of the other nearby towns and actually join in your tournament. And if we don't know about it, then we don't plan for it. And if you're posting and promoting those events and things, it just builds a bigger, stronger, wider, and broader community for all these different games we love to play. Which, speaking of playing games, we can go into yapping about some of the stupid shit we've been doing, like gaming.
Yeah, we've been doing that.
Well, no, we haven't. Yeah, your mom's been
I got a big Tiddlywink tournament going on at the house right now. It's intense.
You're not even there.
Exactly.
But how are you playing Tiddlywinks at your house?
I'm managing it. Don't you worry about it.
I'm confused. I need an adult. Ted Cruz, save me.
No.
All right. So anyway,
Help me, Ted Cruz.
yeah. As I've discussed, and I think when I originally wrote these show notes, I was thinking I was going to get some more gaming in between now and then. But yeah, I did play, some Aeronautica Imperialis. And that was, like I said, a lot of fun. It got me stoked. I actually got the Rin's World, and this is well worth it for those that are into it. The Rin's World engagement map. First off, it's bigger than the little paper one they give you in the starter box.
Yeah.
By a good foot on each side, I think, almost. It's I can't remember the exact breakdown, but it's 2-inch hexes, and it's like I think half a foot on one side and a foot on the other. So
right.
It's a lot bigger. And it's 2 double-sided sections. So you can change it up if you want. I also bought the cards for the Imperial faction because I really don't have any interest in playing orcs.
That's because you're wrong.
Maybe.
Shots fired.
But I mean, like I said, I've always liked orcs. I just never really cared about playing them.
That's right.
Because I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
But I bought my Imperial cards, which is really cool because that box has some. It's really nicely printed. Good card stock. It has all your multiple upgrades, multiple weapons upgrades, multiple cards for every fighter that's out.
Same. I bought the orc one and not expensive.
Why'd you buy the orc one?
Because I'm right.
No, you're not. You're a bitch.
But yeah, I agree. The cards are well put together and worth having just because it helps you, like you were saying, that way you're not passing a book back and forth.
Right. And I got, like I said, the campaign book on iBooks, which was a great buy.
Yeah.
It has the rules in it, that it has all the stuff for the campaign, and it talks about Rin's World and gives you background and all that kind of stuff, so it's cool. The only thing I was not able to get was the ground assets, which I haven't gotten yet, simply because I kind of really want to know a little better on how much I'm actually going to play this game before I go crazy. And then, of course, I did have to get the Marauder Destroyers because, well, more planes.
Yeah, more planes.
And the Marauder Destroyers are really cool.
I only have 2 planes. Fighters and fighter bombers, and that's it.
Because orcs don't have an imagination.
They don't.
They go...
But they do keep the Emperor alive.
Yeah, probably.
Because they believe that he's real, so therefore he is.
Yeah, whatever nonsense Ken's talking about. I've stopped listening a while ago. I think I zoned out.
As for gaming, I've been just getting ready for the tournament over at Gigabytes on the 28th. Trying to get some more of the Dreamer crew painted up and ready to throw down there.
That's and that's on a Saturday, right?
I believe so.
Yep. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. So, I'm hoping you give our wonderful little gaming group a good show. Our honor rests on your shoulders, sir.
Oh, wonderful.
And at some point, I think I may actually find a T-shirt print on demand, and I really want to do Team Stinky Fingers.
Yeah.
No, that's terrible.
I know. Well, because our group chat that we have in the gaming group, Joe Thompson changed the name to the Stinky Fingered Bastards of Hell. And so I was like, it'd be hilarious just to have Team Stinky Fingers. and come up with a really disgusting looking logo.
So I'm saying a little demon sniffing his fingers.
That might work.
Yeah. That might work. Where is Gigabytes? In case somebody wants to check
Marietta.
it out.
Marietta, thank you.
Yeah, so North Georgia, Marietta.
Mm-hmm. And Gigabytes is an awesome shop.
Yep.
If you do live in Georgia, or even if you live within probably 4 hours of Marietta.
Yeah, it's worth going.
It is well worth trekking down there. They have all kinds of neat little sandwiches and stuff like that, and they serve beer.
Yeah, good atmosphere is the big thing. Lots of playing surfaces, good atmosphere.
Yeah.
The staff is
Nice
awesome.
layout.
Yeah.
Yeah, staff is really great there.
They have a massive selection. It's hard to walk in there and not drop a couple $100.
Right, and that's the thing is when you go around to a lot of stores like I have in travels and just working with different store owners around the country, is not many store owners dedicate that much tabletop space.
Right.
And they really made the effort to give the gamers lots of room to play games, which is awesome. Instead of going in and trying to fight over 2 tables, you've got a lot to pick from.
Yeah, I believe their main area is, I think, 12 tables.
Yeah, something like that.
And then they have set around the main area. They have the the folding tables that are they're I believe 2x6, but they have them sandwiched together, so they're it's all 4x6 areas, and that's where a lot of people play D&D. But should those 12 tables be taken, they will pull a topper out of the back and throw it on one of those things for you.
Absolutely.
Because I've done it multiple times, and they're a great shop. But yeah, that's most of that. And then maybe upcoming soon, Ken and I might get a game of Flames of War in, so I can actually learn it.
Yep, I will. I actually, started working on a couple of lists, and I'll help Eric, build a list or two based off what you do have, and we'll start playing games. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, I have most of the stuff in the Hit the Beach starter set.
Yep.
And I probably have more interest in playing Americans than anything else. So I hope you like being Germans, you crap bastard. I think that'll be fun playing it, because I noticed too they do a lot of their stats similar, with like hits on a 4-up or things like that, right?
Yeah, it depends on the thing. Is they have a morale and a training capability for each list as you're putting together the specific list, and so based upon your training capability and your morale, different things happen with that list. And so a lot of times you're going to hit on a particular, like a 4-up or whatever, but then the wounding, as in gamer speak, the wounding is completely different from what you're used to. Yeah.
Well,
they have the whole bailout and re-embark for the tanks.
Yeah, what it is pretty much every gun has a firepower rating, meaning, hey, I hit you, but do I actually penetrate your armor, or do I just rattle everybody in the tank? Well, if you don't make your firepower check, they do what they call bailout for a vehicle, which is the people either got really scared and they all bailed out, or you just rattled everybody in the tank and they have to recoup from getting their bell rung because a shell just hit the crap out of their tank.
I always thought it was almost kind of maybe it hit bad enough to where there was a fire and they had to put that out.
Put it out, or it just represents all those possibilities, which is interesting.
Nice. Well, I think with that, kind of done. We'll probably go into talking about some hobby stuff. Yeah. I have, aside from putting together the Aeronautica Imperialis, I've been painting them. Anybody who gets that, big help you out thing. Those bases do come apart. So what you can do is you can get, I actually used the back end of some tweezers, as a flat metal piece, and just carefully leveraged it open so as not to break anything. And then I could take the dials out, because my initial starter set, I actually put masking tape on them and tried rotating it around to where it was blocking the holes and getting masking tape in there so that it wouldn't, paint over the numbers as I was painting it.
I see what you mean.
Or I wouldn't have, in a blank area between numbers, a spot that was black or anything weird like that. That worked almost good, but then I read online in one of the discussions about it that you can pull those bases apart. They do just snap apart, and then you can take the dials out, snap them back together, prime them, paint
them, and then put the dials back.
Yeah, and varnish them so you don't scratch your paint right off while you're trying to put them back together, and then put the dials back in and go with them from there. I rather like the way I did mine. I'm pretty happy with it.
Oh, it was so pretty.
It is pretty. I basically did a primer, then I did like kind of because for those of you who may not have seen it, you literally have it's a hex base, and from each side of the hex, you basically have everything coming into like triangles, and they're done like they're almost like these metallic looking, metal steel looking things. And then in the areas that are fire arcs, which is your front fire arc, your front right, your front left, and your rear, those 4 out of 6 triangles have almost like what looks like a radar screen type grid on them. Mm-hmm. And so what I did is I primed everything black, then I did a white kind of fade with my favorite Zenithal shading medium, which is a Liquitex titanium white ink through the airbrush.
Right, for the airbrush. Right.
And did that. And then I went over with the Process Scion from De La Rowney inks and got them blue. And then just gave them, I did pin washing into the lines with Dark Tone from Army Painter.
Okay.
And which is probably, Dark Tone and Strong Tone are my 2 favorite washes ever. Mm-hmm. You really don't need a whole lot else if you're using those, because they're amazing. And then after that, I painted everything else metallic, and then the little symbols for the speed and the altitude, I did yellow and red respectively. Those I used, I love the Pro Acryl paints from Slow Fuse Gaming, Monument Hobbies / Creature Caster.
Right.
Those are probably the best acrylic paints I have ever used, bar none.
Yeah. It was interesting. I started putting together the orcs, and I decided to do 2 or 3 fighters at a time, based upon the old cliques or gangs inside of old school orc idealism. So, I'm painting some that are flash git, some that are, the speed freaks, and some that are bad moons. So I have some that are blue, some that are red, some that are gold. Like blue and gold and white. I'm just mixing it up so that different squadrons look like different squadrons.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is totally understandable.
Yep. And then it's interesting, all this crazy Raven Guard stuff is coming out. Like about 6 or 8 months ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put together another Raven Guard army, because this will be like my 3rd Raven Guard army that I'm putting together. And I bought all of this Forge World stuff so I can mix and match. And Eric gave me a few of the Mark IV armors for Marines, or I guess that's what it was.
In exchange for Lehman Russ tanks and weird sexual favors.
Whoa. But anyway.
I wasn't supposed to tell you about shit. Sorry.
Excuse me.
Hope Jeremy's not jealous.
But yeah, I'm putting together stuff with Forge World and, plastics from GW. And it's going pretty well. It's helping give more of a Raven Guard feel to it. But now I know they're going to come out with tons. I mean, they already started putting up the kits for Raven Guard, where it comes with extra decals and the helmets and things like that.
Oh yeah,
so,
the shoulders
the
and all
shoulders
that.
And all that.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I was like, curses, like I was just ahead of my time and I didn't know it.
Yeah, that happens. It's kind of like I've had for years now the idea to do my custom Space Marine chapter, and then lo and behold, GW answered my mental telepathic summons and released a Space Marine Codex that, instead of just saying, oh, well, these will count as whatever chapter traits you want them to count as, they said, here's a bunch that are kind of their own thing that you can mix and match and use to make your own successor chapters. So now I can actually put out a thematic army that is based on, the Grammaton clerics from Equilibrium.
Right.
And that paint job is going to be fun hobby-wise, because the main bulk of the troops are going to be black. Like, think, Black Riot SWAT armor. I mean, the guys in the movie that are the kind of faceless, functionaries of that, enforcement body, I guess. They're wearing, heavy black body armor with, black fatigues underneath and black motorcycle helmets with reflective visors. I mean, they're just all blacked out. And so the idea that I have is, the three colors of the actual main, thing is black, white, and red.
Nice.
So everything's going to be very black, white, and red. And the idea was to do all of my, basic line troopers, your basic, space marines, just these are the dudes. They're going to be all black. With, I'm probably going to do like red shoulder guard trim and then like a white panel in the shoulder to put the insignia for the, them on there. They'll kind of end up looking very Black Templars-y. But to pull them away from that, I've been kind of debating a formula for doing black. Which there's a lot of ways to do it. Some people just, paint shit black and then do some, panel lining and wash it and a little bit extra highlights and go from there. What I'm going to do is I plan on basically taking, a black prime model, giving it a coat of actual, black paint, because it seems pointless and redundant, but I don't really like using the primer as my main coat, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
It just,
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like...
You like adding that layer after the black
I want
before you start.
Yeah, I want to add another layer on there just to kind of create another bond, I guess, between things and help, protect the model a little bit more. And also help cover up some imperfections that may be in the sculpt. And then from there, I've seen a couple different methods, but I'm probably going to use the blue-black method, which is basically, you take your black and you mix in blue with it and basically do like a zenithal shading on a black model with blue with your airbrush. And then from there, you take your brush and you pick out your details and do your washes and things like that. And it looks like it will be a very quick method to paint a lot of models black, which is what I want. Because the idea is that, most of my guys are going to be black with, like I said, red trim. I might do a few other colors to denote like unit markings and things like that. Something along those lines. And then the lieutenants will actually be red armored. And then the captains and, higher ups will all be white armored. Because, and the inspiration comes from, at the end of the movie, Christian Bale, when it becomes super badass and, tears apart the whole organization, he's wearing just like an all white, kind of, karate outfit or whatever the kung fu pajamas, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Cleric clothes.
Whoop ass pajamas.
Yeah, whoop ass jammies. He's wearing all that stuff, and the idea is I want to follow that color scheme, and then of course I'm going to write an entire background for this. What planet they're on, why they're like this, what's going on. I'm going to base a lot of it off the movie, so that when it goes in, and
right.
It'll be fun painting, because I think that a lot of people, black, yellow, red, and white are kind of your four most challenging colors in miniature painting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people struggle with those a lot. Well, I have a real cheaty way to do white with the airbrush, which is basically, prime it whatever the hell you want, and then you take that titanium white from Liquitex and you literally just layer it with the airbrush.
Right.
And
use the airbrush to help you.
Yeah, well, the reason the Liquitex is so good is because it is transparent enough to give you tonal variety in your whites, but it also goes on thick enough to actually cover what's underneath. And as you layer it, it doesn't get weird or chalky or strange or any of the normal downfalls with painting a lot of white.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm doing that shit.
Understandable. And so building a backstory to a Space Marine army like that, and like putting that much thought into an army, what does that do for you as a player? I mean, are you doing that because you're enjoying the hobby part of it or writing the story, or is it like all of that?
I mean, kind of. I sit there and I'm painting my dudes and I'm nerding the fuck out. Like, in my head, like I'm going, oh shit, these guys could be from a planet like this and they could kind of have this as a dogmatic, kind of thing about them. and they can kind of be like this or that, and and kind of this brings in this element of the movie, and I start tying things together, and it gives me something to just think about while I'm painting, really, and while I'm doing my hobby, and what I would want to see, what can be thematic, and because you put your toy soldiers on a board and you run them at each other and you throw dice, and you're only invested in the rules, you're only invested in your list, you're only invested in the money you spent on the models, and the maybe whatever time you put in to throw them on the table. When you create that whole entire world, I think you become so much more invested into what you're doing and the game you're playing, and it goes from being like not just a miniature tabletop game to almost being, it brings in that kind of D&D aspect.
Right. Well, we talk about rule of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get more into it, if it becomes cooler for you, you're going to enjoy playing it more.
Yeah, and at that point, your character is not, a barbarian. It's the entire army. It's the entire people that your army is representing, or whatever.
Your play style is reflected back into what you're doing. Yeah.
Right, and I think that's one of the cooler things of the hobby, is that there is stuff out there that lets you do that.
Yeah, one of the other things that I did hobby-wise this week is I like making terrain. I enjoy it. I don't know why. Something's
I'm
broken.
glad you're here, because I fucking hate it.
But it was interesting when Aeronautica came out. I thought, at some point somebody traded me a Thunderbolt that was broken, like a Forge World big piece of resin Thunderbolt. But like they tried to put it together and failed, and were like, "Screw this thing! I'm never putting it together." And I traded them something for it along the way. I can't remember what. Anyway, I found that Thunderbolt this week, and I am totally making a crashed Thunderbolt piece of terrain for 40K now because of Aeronautica. And I was like, that's a great idea to use this, because I wasn't ever sure what I could do with, like a partially broken Thunderbolt. But now I have a completely reasonable thing to do with it. So I put together a small piece of terrain for 40K out of a crashed ship. I think that's going to be fun.
This sounds cool, and Ken is actually incredibly good at making terrain. I really like a lot of the terrain pieces that you had and that you made before. I remember one of the times back in the Triumph Games days when you were like, "Hey, come check this out," and I went back there and you were like building an entire table's worth of terrain all in one.
At one big fell swoop. Yeah,
and this thing had rivers on it and all kinds of crazy shit. I remember it was it was epic. It was probably one of the few times I've ever been like, "Wow, I bet I could do that." But it would involve me doing terrain, and then I literally just dropped the idea that quick because no, I don't know why. It hasn't clicked. I haven't gotten it. I used to also hate building models, and now I love it. In fact, I put together most of my Shadow Spear this week, and I think I've got all but one model all glued together, ready to go.
Yeah, isn't that weird that one of the things that happened as I own shops, and I painted a lot for people. Just you've got downtime when you're in a shop, and so you're painting armies, you're doing things on commission, you're doing all sorts of things just to make just a little bit of extra revenue here and there. But one of the funny things was that there was always people who were like, "Hey, will you put these models together and prime it, and then I'll take over from here?" And I was always amazed by those people, but they just didn't enjoy that part of the hobby.
No, there's a lot of people that do not like building models out there, and
I think that's probably one of my favorite parts about it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I
It's like building Legos as a kid.
You're right.
It's just so fun to put them together.
I don't know why. I had no problems with lead miniatures back in the day. I would glue those together all the time. I would do stuff like that. And then, about that 4th or 5th edition, when I got back into 40K, I hated putting them together for a while. I was like, I just want this thing together so I can paint it and get it on the table. I don't give two shits about this part. Somebody miracle this damn model together.
Please clip all this out and put it together for me.
I think there was one time I threatened to kick Rabbit in the balls
Yeah.
to help, because I wanted him to put together my drop pod for me, and he wouldn't.
Yeah.
He made me do it, that bastard. Because I was about ready to throw that thing across the store too, because I just couldn't get these pieces to fit together right. And then he's like, well, no, look at it from this and what this and blah, blah, blah. Now you break it down and then you do this. And you just really need to snip off this little bit of flash that you left on and it'll go right back together. And I'm like, are you serious, dude? And then I did it and I was like, man, I fucking hate you. Like,
it was interesting. Rabbit was a very interesting guy that worked with me at the store for a while. You would not meet a more positive guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was like positivity.
Oh, yeah. He was a lot of fun to hang out with. I would go and hang out with him and build and paint at his house.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. I mean, he was a lot of fun to hang around. He was always very positive.
Yeah.
And his knowledge of chemistry was insane. Because you never thought, I mean, he kind of had that like absent-minded nutty professor vibe about him. But then I go to his house and he's like, I'm making thermite. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, and he's like, look at this. See this hole in the driveway that's burned down to halfway to China? Yeah, that was when I first did my first experiment with thermite. I'm like, oh my God, dude. What the hell?
Yeah, it was interesting. Earlier you mentioned the resin, just to kind of keep up with the hobby theme, as you mentioned the resin to plastic and like using the right glue for the right reasons.
Yes.
I hope everybody out there listening knows the right glues to use for the right reasons. But if you don't know, ask. Figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much with resin to anything, you're going to have to use super glue.
Right. Anything metal, super glue.
Anything metal, super glue. And then
I was actually kind of upset I didn't have more things to put together when I discovered the super glue and the accelerator. I only had like one thing to build, and after it was so much fun to make it happen, they were like, I have nothing else to build with it. I need something to build with this. I bought this whole little spray bottle of accelerator, and I have nothing else to use it for.
Yeah. I used to hate the smell of it. I always thought
it's not a pleasant smell.
Yeah, it's not as pleasant.
Oh, speaking of, and this fits in with hobby talk, smells. Have you ever used Microsol or Microset?
Yes.
Or both together? That shit smells like rancid ostrich eggs that like somebody ate and then shat back out. Like,
Maybe there's just something wrong with yours.
Maybe, I don't know. It is foul.
Yeah.
Foul smelling stuff.
Yeah.
But it does awesome with decals.
Yeah, I was going to say, I used Microset a lot. I don't use the Sol as much, but it depends on it. You use the Sol if you're trying to manipulate the curvature of whatever you're putting it on. I mean, if some of these decals, guys, have been sitting in a box for years. These decal sheets can be pretty rigid, and it depends on that. Because if you're trying to put it over a curved surface using the solvent on it, really helps you kind of bend it and mold it to the surface.
The best formula for decals that I have gotten is from a gentleman who's in one of the 40K communities that is a commission painter. His name is Colin Ward, and he does amazing decal work. It looks like they're painted on. It doesn't look like they're decals anymore. And what he does is he takes a little bit of gloss varnish, puts it down where the decal is going to go, usually a little bit outside of that or whatever. Then he'll paint. You brush on a little bit of the Microset
set, yep.
And then you soften up your decal and put it on the model where you have your Microset. And then once you have it kind of situated where you want it, I usually brush on a little bit more of the Microset right before I get it fully situated, and then I situate it, make sure it's right where I want it, and then you take a kind of semi-damp, very lightly damp paper towel, and just hold it over the top, and that helps suck up that stuff and activate it or do whatever it does, and then you take that off, and then I do use Microsol because I found that it really starts helping contour the decal.
Yeah. Or if you have a bubble, sometimes you'll have a little ridge in it. Using the Microsol, it will definitely kind of like flatten it out the right way.
It helps get all that out of there. And so I use that little bit of Microsol, And then again, I do kind of do the paper towel over top of it to kind of set it down in there and make sure it's, totally flat on the model, and, push down on it to get everything out. And then you go back and you just matte varnish the hell out of it.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And it looks like it has been painted on.
Yeah. Another weird thing about decals that I'll share with everybody is, and maybe I'm the only idiot that didn't figure this out along the way, but for the longest time, I would go, okay, I'm going to cut out this decal and then like put it in this cup of water and then pull it out with a pair of tweezers and try to get it off, and all that stuff. And, you're using brushes to like pull it off slightly. It changed my life when one day I just set I use a Gale Force 9 paint sponge system. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but if you wet a sponge and put the cutout decal on top of the sponge will release that decal from the paper, and you can just pull it off with a dry brush and like set it exactly where you need to without tweezers or anything goofy. And once I figured out that you could just put it on a sponge and make it go, that like changed my life with decals. It made it so much easier.
Or if you can set them on top of the wet palette.
The wet palette. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, the Gale Force 9 wet palette. Yeah.
Yeah, which
or I guess Privateer Press makes one. It's just any wet palette that you have, you can just set the decals on the sponge and it works.
There is a company, Red Grass Games.
Yeah.
And they make the best wet palettes I have ever used, and they are well worth the money. Of course, you can make your own, the Hobo wet palette. That's what Jeremy does.
Hobo hammer.
Yep.
Yeah.
He you basically get some parchment paper, a little bit of paper towel. You wet the paper towel nice and good. Cut the parchment paper to whatever size paper towel you have. Put it on there. Stick it in a Tupperware container.
Yep.
And you can keep it nice and wet. And what that does, for those that don't know or don't use wet palettes, what that does is that keeps your paint wet.
Yeah.
Moist.
I feel unsafe now.
You should.
You need to stop. I can only get so erect.
I know. I keep trying to make it go. Anyway, but the once you have that, it keeps your paints and lets you work with them a lot longer. Also, depending on the paint and everything, it can kind of help. It doesn't necessarily thin them. Nothing really substitutes for a little bit of water to thin it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it does help it, be a little bit thinner-ish. And like I said, sit there and then you can work it and do whatever you need, do blendings, things like that. It is a very necessary thing. And it lets you, to me, it also lets you see like how, translucent or opaque your paint is based on how much you're thinning it and what you're thinning it with.
Yeah.
If you want to create a glaze, it's real easy to check stuff out that way.
I was going to say, what I did, I was painting so much at one point that I started painting with just white ceramic tiles. I mean, 4-inch tiles were my life for a long time when it came to paint, and they were easy to clean up and stuff like that because you could just take it off with a razor. But because I had to start and stop so much, like I was like, I have to have a better solution. That's why I switched to a wet palette in the first place. But now I wouldn't paint without a wet palette.
Right. When I first got back into it, recently, I went and grabbed some tiles and was like, oh, hell yeah, a couple of years ago.
Sure.
Right before 8th edition came out, I was like, I'm going to go grab some tiles. And I was painting with tiles as a palette for a little while. And then I got one of the Privateer wet palettes, and I think it got screwed up somehow or something. It ended up getting messed up. And I think one of the animals chewed it or something. I can't remember, but I was pretty upset about it. But I started using that, and I was like, "This is amazing." I don't, why would I ever use anything different? And then, at work, the wet palette has allowed me to, I can paint stuff at work in between clients.
Right.
I've got an hour and a
start
half.
and stop. Yeah, because I mean, on the ceramic tile, it dries up in like 5 minutes. But on the wet palette, I could mix my paints, start doing something, have a 15-minute conversation with somebody, come back to my wet palette. It's still good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
with like the Tupperware ones, you snap that lid on, and I've come back a couple hours later, and the paint's fine.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the awesomeness of a wet palette. The Redgrass games are, they actually have a grommet seal that kind of keeps them sealed. And so you can literally be like, all right, cool, I'm done painting for the day, and throw that top on there and come back to it. My area that I live in specifically is incredibly humid. So I can literally leave it covered for about a week and still use the paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might have to thin it a bit, but yeah.
Yeah,
but if you live in New Mexico, that might not happen.
Yeah. If you live in a drier area than I do.
People from Death Valley, Arizona, we don't want your hate mail.
Yeah, that's right.
However, my home is also so humid that I have literally left my wet palette uncovered. And it takes a good 4 to 5 days for the wet palette itself to dry out.
Right.
So I have a little bit different experience. When we first moved into this house, I tried rattle can priming stuff. Everything was fuzzy.
Everything was
and
fuzzy.
It was a warm day. The sun was out. Like, it did not seem like it was that much humidity in the air, but because we have a river basically running through our backyard and are literally like 10 feet from a floodplain, like, it is obscenely humid in my area.
So, just to kind of point this out, you've stopped doing rattle can priming for almost everything.
I only prime with an airbrush.
Yeah.
I don't use rattle can for anything because it was just unfeasible. The only way I could rattle can would be best weather days possible inside my garage with everything closed up,
right,
and fans going for ventilation, and then I have to, once that got done, I have to open up the doors.
Yeah.
Once most of the paint was dry, and even then, I still got a fuzzy model or two.
Yeah. It's interesting. Some people just prefer to do the airbrush for it. I mean, that's
Some people prefer rattle can. Either way,
Yeah.
If your area is conducive to rattle can, keep rattle can in it.
Yeah.
I prefer airbrush.
Yeah. Understandable.
For like everything.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think we've hit on a lot of neat stuff and a lot of different topics for this one, and maybe we even threw some jokes in there that people will laugh at. All in all, I'm pretty happy.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for closing notes, you guys also don't forget the BD and SM. That's BD and then the little and symbol, whatever the hell it's called. And SM Drunkards Facebook group is our group because, we're drunk. Go ahead, join up if you'd like to. And I believe there are questions to the joining process. Please answer them.
Right.
If not, there will be soon enough. Probably by the time you hear this podcast, I'll have questions down. But please answer them. If you don't answer them, I'm probably going to assume you're a spam bot, and I will deny. And then, use that group. Post your hobby progress. Post the things you're working on. Talk about games you want to play, things you see, stuff you think is cool. Whatever, that's what that group is for. And I'd really like to see a lot more of that going on.
Yeah.
So use it, because I had the envisionment of using this tool for this purpose, and I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah, we'd like to see community grow.
Right.
Absolutely.
Always. Anything to grow the community. Yeah. Try to stay hobby positive and community positive and keep things going. And we all want to play these games and love these games, and that's what we want to do. And next podcast, we'll probably be talking about, I believe, will be after the tournament, because we're...
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll get Jeremy's take on the tournament, and how he did and what happened, and if he didn't win the gold, I'm going to kick his ass.
Now I got a reason to lose.
Yay. Things like that. We'll have a game night over here in between then and there, and maybe we'll get some more games in and have a little bit more to talk about on different stuff. And I'm sure there'll be new releases, because GW needs to put that impulsor out, because I really want it for my Grammaton Clerics list. I mean, it's base police SWAT, so
That's
I
right.
want transports and tanks and things like that in there. But anyway, you guys all have a good night, and thank you for listening. You beautiful, wonderful people out there and all your amazingness. Good
Night.
night.